Lyra Kane adjusted her posture as she slid into the familiar seat at Star Academy's central training hall. The room hummed with activity, a low murmur of conversations in dozens of alien languages filling the air. High above, the ceiling's transparent dome offered a view of distant stars and swirling nebulae, reminding everyone present that they were far from home. Yet despite the cosmic grandeur, Lyra's focus remained firmly on the present. This was her first week at Star Academy, and she already knew it would not be easy. Humans were a minority in the galaxy's elite schools, and their physical abilities often lagged behind the other species' natural advantages. Aliens towered over her, with limbs built for speed or strength far beyond what any human could manage. But Lyra had long ago learned that humans thrived not by raw power, but by cleverness, patience, and observation. She had come prepared to prove it. The class was already in session. Instructors, a mix of human veterans and aliens who had served in intergalactic fleets, moved among the cadets, checking on their equipment and noting their readiness for the day's exercises. Holographic training modules floated in the center of the hall, casting soft blue glows across the faces of the cadets. Lyra's attention, however, was drawn to the figure entering from the far side of the hall, Raxor. He was an alien elite cadet from the planet Grathol, known for producing some of the galaxy's finest warriors. His skin was a deep crimson, and every muscle seemed sculpted for combat. When he entered, the room seemed to shift, the energy of his presence commanding attention, and all eyes, naturally, turned to him, and then to Lyra. Raxor's gaze swept across the room, lingering just long enough on Lyra for a small smirk to form on his jagged, angular face. "Well, well," he said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying effortlessly across the hall. "Look who decided to join us today. The human cadet who thinks she can compete with real warriors." A ripple of laughter followed him, light and mocking, mostly from other alien cadets. Lyra's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest of her seat, but she made no move to respond. She had learned long ago that arrogance was often the first weakness a person revealed. Raxor, like many others, relied on his strength to intimidate, assuming that fear alone would be enough to control a situation. Raxor strode confidently toward the front of the class, glancing back occasionally to ensure that everyone was watching. "I hope you are ready to watch how a real cadet trains," he continued. "Or are you going to stay there, thinking your tiny human mind can calculate what these arms and legs already know by instinct?" Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, but she kept her calm. She didn't rise from her seat. She didn't react in any way that might show fear or irritation. Instead, she studied him. Every motion, every subtle shift in his weight, the rhythm of his breathing. She took it all in. To anyone else, she seemed passive, even timid. But her mind was active, recording, calculating, analyzing. The instructors, sensing the rising tension, intervened before it could escalate. "Cadets, settle down!" called Instructor Talvin, a towering humanoid with silver hair and emerald eyes.
"This is not a performance hall. Focus on your exercises."
"Let's begin the day's simulation." The cadets moved toward their designated stations. Lyra's seat had been specially equipped with a portable simulation console, a compact device that allowed her to control and manipulate various training scenarios. She activated the interface, and the room dimmed slightly as a new holographic display flickered to life before her. Raxor, still smirking, approached her station. "I must say," he said, leaning slightly toward her, "it will be entertaining to see a human try to survive even a single round in this simulation. Shall I make it easy, or should I test you properly?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, her expression serene. "I'm sure I'll manage," she said calmly, her tone even and confident. "Manage?" Raxor's laugh was loud and booming. "You'll learn quickly that managing is not enough. Here, physical strength wins. Always." He turned and flexed his massive arms, exaggerating the motion as if to prove a point. The other cadets chuckled and whispered among themselves, glancing at Lyra with curiosity and doubt. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink in a way that would betray nerves. Instead, she focused on the simulation, watching the holographic field respond to her inputs. The first exercise was a basic combat scenario. Holographic enemies appeared and cadets were supposed to neutralize them quickly, testing their reflexes, strategy, and adaptability. Many cadets charged immediately, relying on brute strength or speed to overcome the challenges. Lyra, however, remained seated. She studied the holograms carefully, noticing patterns in their movement and behavior. Raxor charged into his own scenario with a powerful leap, knocking the holograms aside effortlessly. He glanced at Lyra again, raising an eyebrow as if to ask, "What now?" Lyra's fingers danced across her console. The holographic field around her shifted subtly, a small but precise adjustment. When the first wave of holographic enemies approached her, she didn't move. Instead, she guided them along a carefully designed path that directed them to collide with one another. The collisions were harmless. They were, after all, holograms, but they slowed the oncoming wave, giving her perfect control over the situation. Raxor noticed immediately. His smirk faltered slightly. "Wait, what is she doing?" he muttered, leaning closer to see her interface. By the end of the exercise, the instructors were amazed. While many cadets had relied on raw strength or reflexes, Lyra had completed the simulation flawlessly, neutralizing every holographic threat without leaving her seat. She had used logic, timing, and the environment itself to her advantage. When the exercise ended, the cadets filed out for a short break. Raxor approached Lyra again, his tone dripping with a mixture of frustration and incredulity. How did you do that?" he asked, his voice low, almost uncharacteristically humble. Lyra didn't rise or step closer. She simply looked at him and said, "I watched. I waited. I used what I had." Strength isn't always what wins. Raxor's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned and stomped away, muttering under his breath. Other cadets exchanged glances, the air thick with whispers. Some were impressed. Others were shocked that a human could outmaneuver an elite Grotholian without any physical confrontation. Lyra's instructors approached her, a mix of pride and curiosity on their faces. "Well done, Cadet Kane," said Instructor Talvin. "You've shown exactly why humans, though often underestimated, have an edge in adaptability and strategy. Keep this up and you might surprise everyone here." Lyra nodded. Though she didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her actions had already made the point. As the cadets prepared for the next exercise, Lyra's mind was already running ahead. She noted Raxor's weaknesses, his reliance on brute force, his overconfidence, and the way he reacted predictably under pressure. She made mental notes on how to use those tendencies to her advantage in future simulations. Outside the training hall, the vast expanse of the Academy awaited. Star Academy was a place where species from across the galaxy came to learn, compete, and prove their worth. Many looked down on humans, assuming they were weak, fragile, or slow. But Lyra had long since learned that humans had strengths others often overlooked: creativity, ingenuity, and a calm mind in the face of chaos. She allowed herself a small private smile. The day had begun as any other, but by the end of the first exercise she had already turned the expectations of the elite cadets upside down. And she knew this was only the beginning. Lyra glanced back at Raxor, who was still fuming silently, surrounded by his alien friends who whispered and laughed nervously. He had underestimated her, and that mistake, she knew, would give her an advantage. In the galaxy, mistakes could be deadly, but they also offered opportunities, and humans, Lyra thought, were very good at seizing them. As the next exercise was announced, she leaned back in her seat, fingers ready to control the next scenario. Around her, the other cadets moved quickly, eager to prove themselves. But Lyra didn't rush. She had learned that the first rule of survival, whether in a training simulation or real life, was observation. The second rule was patience. And the third, she reminded herself, was to turn every weakness the others saw into her strength. The days stretched on, filled with simulations, lessons, and exercises. Cadets ran, jumped, and flexed their physical abilities, earning praise for feats of strength and speed. Lyra, meanwhile, continued to excel quietly, using her mind as her weapon, outsmarting every challenge without breaking a sweat. By the time the final exercise of the day ended, it was clear to everyone watching that something extraordinary was happening. The human cadet, so small, so underestimated, had demonstrated an ability that no amount of muscle could match. And while Raxor seethed in silence, Lyra's calm demeanor and quiet confidence had earned her something more valuable than laughter or respect. She had earned attention, and in Star Academy, attention meant opportunity. As the cadets filed out, Lyra remained seated for a moment, letting the quiet of the hall wash over her. Stars shimmered above in the transparent dome, and she thought about the days ahead. The galaxy was vast, and many challenges awaited her, but she felt ready. Humans had a place here, not by strength, but by strategy, ingenuity, and a refusal to be underestimated. Lyra Kane, the human cadet, had arrived, and though many did not yet realize it, she was just getting started. The next morning, the Star Academy training hall was alive with energy, brighter and louder than the day before. Cadets from dozens of planets moved quickly, checking their equipment, adjusting helmets, and discussing tactics. Holographic training modules floated above the floor, casting glowing light over each cadet. Despite the chaos, Lyra Kane walked calmly, her eyes scanning the room, quietly noting the patterns of every other cadet. Raxor was already there, pacing near the front of the hall. His crimson skin shimmered under the light, and the muscles of his arms flexed as he stretched. He had clearly not forgotten yesterday's exercises, and his jaw tightened as he glanced at Lyra. The human cadet sat calmly at her station, as if nothing had happened.
"Well, human," Raxor said loudly, drawing the attention of the surrounding cadets. "Today, you won't be able to hide behind fancy tricks or small movements. Strength counts here. We'll see if your mind is enough."
Lyra looked up briefly at him, her expression neutral. "I'm sure I'll manage," she said softly, her voice calm. The instructors called the cadets to gather for the first exercise. It was a team-based challenge, where small groups had to complete a tactical simulation together, combining strategy and skill to solve problems. Lyra's team included a mix of humans and smaller alien cadets who had often been overlooked in past exercises. Her job was clear: guide the team using logic, observation, and timing. Raxor's team, in contrast, consisted of the strongest cadets in the class. Their strategy was simple: overpower anyone in their way, complete the objectives quickly, and show everyone who was dominant. Confidence radiated from Raxor like heat, and his team followed his lead without question. When the exercise began, holographic obstacles appeared, creating a maze-like environment filled with shifting walls, moving platforms, and simulated threats. Many cadets charged ahead immediately, relying on speed and brute force. Lyra, however, remained seated at her console, her fingers moving deftly across the interface. She manipulated the holographic field carefully, adjusting the paths and timing of obstacles to her team's advantage. Raxor noticed immediately. "What is she doing?" he muttered under his breath. He leaned forward slightly, trying to see her actions, but her interface was cleverly designed, preventing him from fully understanding her tactics. Lyra guided her team's movements, ensuring each cadet took the safest path through the maze, while avoiding traps that would have slowed them down. When one obstacle threatened to block their way, she adjusted the sequence so the hazard turned away at the last second. Her team moved efficiently, unaware of the invisible guidance they were receiving. Meanwhile, Raxor's team charged through aggressively, smashing obstacles and moving with confidence. But the more they relied on brute force, the more the shifting holographic walls disrupted them. Some cadets stumbled, others had to backtrack, and their overall speed began to slow. Lyra observed quietly, her mind racing. She noticed Raxor's team relied heavily on predictable patterns. They charged in straight lines, assumed the obstacles would behave consistently, and expected raw strength to solve problems. Humans, she knew, could think differently. As the exercise progressed, she noticed Raxor moving ahead of his team, trying to take advantage of what he assumed were weaknesses. He reached a narrow passage and attempted to force his way through, but Lyra had already manipulated the simulation to close one side just as he entered. Raxor stumbled, his arm brushing against a holographic barrier, and for the first time, his confident expression faltered. Lyra's team continued unharmed, guided smoothly by her subtle manipulations. They didn't run or push, they moved efficiently, almost as if guided by an invisible hand. Cadets from other teams began to whisper, noticing the strange advantage the humans seemed to have. When Raxor finally caught up to Lyra's team, he was breathing heavily, his muscles tense.
"How are you doing this?" he demanded, his voice sharp, almost aggressive. "Are you cheating?" Lyra didn't look up.
"I'm using my tools," she said simply. "I'm observing."
"I'm adjusting. That's not cheating. It's strategy."
Raxor's jaw tightened. He glanced at the instructors, hoping for intervention, but they were watching with interest, recognizing that Lyra was following the rules perfectly. Her calm and measured approach contrasted sharply with Raxor's aggression. The final part of the exercise was a precision challenge. A holographic target appeared at the center of the room, and each team had to complete a sequence of tasks to deactivate it. Time was limited, and errors could delay the team significantly. Raxor charged forward immediately, relying on speed to reach the target first. He attempted to push aside any obstacles in his path, showing little care for finesse. Lyra, however, remained seated. She analyzed the target's behavior, the timing of its moving parts, and the ways Raxor's team would attempt to approach it. As Raxor reached the target, Lyra activated a small adjustment in the simulation. A subtle force redirected his momentum just enough to make him stumble. His hand grazed the control panel, causing a temporary system reset. His expression shifted from confidence to frustration. Lyra leaned back in her seat, observing. She had planned for every movement, every predictable reaction. When her team approached the target, they completed the sequence with precision, following the path Lyra had designed for them. No one had to rush, no one had to fight. Every obstacle had been anticipated and turned into an advantage. When the exercise ended, the instructors tallied the results. Lyra's team had completed the challenge faster and with more accuracy than any other team in the class. Raxor's team, despite their raw strength, had faltered repeatedly, unable to adapt to the subtle manipulations and timing that Lyra had employed. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with whispers and murmurs of surprise. Lyra remained calm, her face serene, as though she had done nothing remarkable. But the cadets around her were talking, excitedly pointing out the human's cleverness. Raxor's face was red, a mix of anger and disbelief. He looked around, hoping someone would validate his frustration, but the other cadets were hesitant to speak. Even those who admired his strength now seemed unsure. For the first time, Raxor faced a human who had outsmarted him without any physical confrontation. Instructor Talvin stepped forward, nodding at Lyra. "Cadet Kane," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "You have demonstrated something important today. Strength alone is not always enough. Observation, strategy, and patience can achieve results that brute force cannot. Humans may be underestimated, but their minds are powerful weapons." Lyra acknowledged the compliment with a slight nod, still quiet, still calm. She didn't need to boast. Her actions spoke for themselves. After the exercise, Lyra's team gathered around her, curious and impressed. "How did you plan everything without moving?" asked one of the younger cadets, a small alien with blue skin and 6 fingers. Lyra smiled slightly.
"I watched first.
I studied the patterns. Then I adjusted the environment to help us succeed."
"It's about thinking ahead, not rushing ahead." Her team nodded, absorbing the lesson.
It was simple, yet profound. Many cadets had relied on physical skill alone, But Lyra had shown them that intelligence and observation could win challenges just as effectively. Meanwhile, Raxor stood at a distance, scowling. He clenched his fists, frustrated that his raw strength had failed him.
"This human," he muttered, shaking his head. "I can't believe she did that without even standing up."
Lyra noticed his gaze but didn't react. She had learned long ago that reacting to arrogance often gave it power. Instead, she returned her focus to her console, preparing for the next exercise. Every moment in the academy was an opportunity to learn, to observe, and to gain an advantage. The next exercise would be more complex, combining strategy, timing, and teamwork in new ways. Lyra's mind was already planning, predicting the movements of other cadets, and calculating the best approaches. She knew Raxor would try to challenge her directly again, but she welcomed it. Humans thrived under pressure, and Lyra intended to show that once more. As the cadets moved toward their next stations, the whispers followed her.
"Did you see that?" one alien cadet said. "The human didn't even move and her team won."
How is that possible?
Lyra allowed herself a small, private smile.
The galaxy was full of surprises, and humans were one of them.
While others relied on strength, humans relied on cleverness, patience, and observation, and that made them dangerous, especially to those who underestimated them. By the time the second set of exercises ended, it was clear that Lyra's presence had changed the tone of the academy. Other cadets began to observe her methods, learning from her approach. Even instructors took note, whispering among themselves about the potential humans held in strategic and tactical operations. Raxor, still frustrated, finally approached her after the session. His tone was tense, a mixture of anger and curiosity.
"Cadet Kane," he said, "you are lucky." Today it was a simulation, but strength matters in real combat. "Don't think you can always outsmart me." Lyra looked at him calmly, her eyes steady. "I don't underestimate strength."
"I just use what I have." Raxor gritted his teeth, unable to respond further.
Lyra turned back to her console, already preparing for the next challenge. She didn't need to prove herself with words. Her actions had already spoken louder than any insult. The day ended with her team victorious once more, and Lyra felt a quiet satisfaction. Every exercise, every observation, every strategic choice reinforced her belief that humans could succeed in a galaxy that often doubted them. Strength, speed, and raw power were impressive, but the human mind, clever, patient, and adaptable, could turn even the strongest opponent's competence against them. Lyra Kane had survived another day at Star Academy. She had outsmarted her competitors, guided her team to victory, and made it clear that humans were not to be underestimated. And as she left the training hall, she knew this was only the beginning. The real challenges, and the true opportunities to show what humans could do, were still ahead. The galaxy had not yet seen the full measure of her mind, and Lyra intended to make sure it would. The next day, the training hall was buzzing with anticipation. Word of Lyra Kane's performance had spread quickly through the academy. Cadets whispered about the human who had outsmarted an elite Gratholian without ever standing up. Some were skeptical, while others were curious. Raxor, however, was seething. He had spent the night plotting, replaying every detail in his mind. He refused to allow a human to outmaneuver him again. Lyra arrived early, as always, calmly taking her seat at the console. Her fingers hovered over the interface, ready to manipulate the next set of simulations. The holographic modules lit up, displaying complex scenarios designed to test strategy, precision, and adaptability. She observed the other cadets moving around the hall, noting Raxor's tense posture as he flexed and stretched. His friends were trying to calm him, but he ignored them entirely, eyes locked on Lyra. Instructor Talvin called the cadets to attention. Today's exercise will test both strategy and improvisation. Teams must navigate a dynamic course filled with unpredictable obstacles. Success will require observation, adaptability, and teamwork.
Cadet Kane, your group is up first.
Lyra's team gathered around her station. They had learned to follow her subtle guidance, trusting her instincts and the adjustments she made to the simulation. Today's exercise was more challenging than yesterday's. The holographic field shifted constantly, walls moved, and platforms rotated. Cadets had to react quickly, or they would be trapped or delayed. Raxor, clearly frustrated, leaned toward his team and barked orders. "Follow my lead. Move fast, move hard, and don't stop for anything." His team nodded, eager to prove their dominance. They assumed brute force would once again guarantee victory. The simulation began. Obstacles emerged, some simple, some complex, and the cadets sprang into action. Raxor's team charged forward aggressively. Walls moved unexpectedly, forcing them to backtrack. Some cadets stumbled, others collided with obstacles. Raxor's expression darkened with each setback, his confidence slipping slightly. Lyra remained seated, watching the patterns carefully. She noticed a subtle flaw in Raxor's approach. He relied entirely on force and speed, ignoring the environment and predictable behaviors of the obstacles. She activated a precise adjustment on her console, redirecting the moving walls so that they would slightly obstruct his path at the exact moment he tried to charge forward. The effect was immediate. Raxor stumbled, his momentum disrupted, and his team hesitated. Lyra's team moved smoothly, guided by her careful manipulations. Every obstacle that could hinder them was adjusted subtly in their favor, while the same obstacles frustrated Raxor's team. Cadets around the room began to murmur, noticing the humans' extraordinary control of the simulation. Raxor clenched his fists, frustration mounting. "This isn't fair!" he shouted. Though the instructors ignored him, rules had not been broken. It was simply Lyra's cleverness at work. Lyra's eyes flicked up briefly. "Strategy isn't about fairness," she said quietly, almost to herself. "It's about results." The simulation reached the final stage, a central platform with a holographic control panel. Teams had to reach it and complete a sequence of tasks to win. Raxor charged ahead, determined to prove his dominance physically. Lyra's fingers moved quickly, adjusting the kinetic flow of the simulation. Force fields subtly redirected Raxor's movement, slowing him just enough to give her team the advantage. Raxor collided with a holographic barrier at the exact moment Lyra had anticipated. He yelped in surprise, stumbling, but remaining upright. The room went silent for a heartbeat as cadets processed what they had just witnessed. Raxor's confidence wavered visibly, and his team struggled to adapt. Lyra's team approached the central platform. She guided them through the final sequence with perfect precision. No one rushed, no one panicked. Obstacles moved aside, doors opened at the right time, and each cadet completed their task flawlessly. The simulation recognized their completion, and a soft chime echoed through the hall. Lyra's team had won again. The room erupted in whispers and quiet applause. Humans, it seemed, were not just clever. They were extraordinary in ways the galaxy often failed to notice. Raxor's face was a mixture of shock and frustration. He had underestimated her once again, and this time it had nearly humiliated him in front of everyone. "Cadet Kane," Instructor Talvin said, stepping forward with a proud smile, "your team has demonstrated once more that strategy, observation, and timing can surpass raw strength. The galaxy often overlooks these qualities in humans, but you have shown their true value." Lyra nodded politely. "Thank you, Instructor," she said. She felt no need to boast. Her actions were already proof enough. Raxor stormed forward, his movements tense. "Enough games," he barked. "I will challenge you directly." No simulators, no tricks. Just us. Lyra remained seated, her fingers poised over the console. She did not flinch. "I'm ready," she said calmly. The instructors allowed the confrontation. The final exercise of the day was designed for individual skill assessment. Raxor and Lyra faced each other across the simulation floor. Holographic obstacles rose around them, and the system was configured to allow physical interactions, though safeguards prevented serious harm. Raxor charged immediately, relying on his strength to intimidate Lyra. He moved fast, aiming to close the distance and overwhelm her. Lyra did not move from her seat. Instead, she observed his approach carefully. She noticed the patterns in his steps, the way he shifted weight, and the angle of his attacks. She activated the console. A subtle energy field enveloped Raxor's path, not strong enough to hurt him, but enough to influence his movements precisely. He stumbled slightly, his arms diverted by an unseen force. Lyra's fingers moved in a calculated rhythm, guiding the field to counter every motion he attempted. Raxor's surprise was evident. "What? What are you doing?" he shouted, trying to push forward, only to find his strength redirected harmlessly. Lyra's voice was calm, measured. "I'm using my strengths," she said. "I observe. I calculate. I adapt. You assume strength wins. I show that it does not always." With a few deft movements on her console, Lyra adjusted the kinetic energy of the simulation. Raxor's arm was gently trapped in the energy field at the exact angle she had calculated. The system's safeguards ensured no injury, but the effect simulated the feeling of resistance, like a joint locked in place.
Raxor yelped in surprise as he tried to pull free, realizing too late that he had underestimated her precision and timing.
The other cadets watched in awe. Raxor, the elite alien, had been effectively stopped without a single physical strike from Lyra. Her intelligence, patience, and understanding of the system had turned his strength against him. Instructor Talvin stepped forward, clapping slowly. "Remarkable," he said. "Cadet Kane has once again demonstrated the true meaning of strategy. Physical power is only one part of success. Observation, analysis, and quick thinking are equally important." Raxor finally freed his arm as the field dissipated. His face was red, a mix of embarrassment and grudging respect.
"This human?" he muttered, shaking his head. "I've never seen anything like this."
Lyra leaned back in her seat, her expression serene. "There is much you have yet to learn." She said simply. The cadets surrounding them murmured excitedly. Aliens who had laughed at her just days ago now regarded her with awe. The lesson was clear. Humans were underestimated at their peril. Raxor did not leave quietly. Instead, he walked to a corner and muttered to himself, replaying the encounter in his mind. Lyra's abilities had exposed his weaknesses: predictable movements, over-reliance on strength, and a lack of patience. He realized that raw power alone was not enough in a galaxy filled with intelligent, adaptable beings. Meanwhile, Lyra's team gathered around her, excited and inspired.
"That was incredible," one cadet said. "You didn't even move, and you stopped him completely."
Lyra smiled faintly. "I didn't need to. I used the tools and knowledge I had."
You can do the same if you watch, think, and plan carefully. Her words resonated with the younger cadets.
Many had doubted themselves, thinking humans were weak and inferior, but now they understood a simple truth. Intelligence, patience, and strategy could overcome even the strongest opponents. The day ended with quiet celebrations among her team and a grudging respect from the rest of the cadets. Lyra had not only won the exercises, she had changed perceptions. Humans were clever, adaptable, and surprisingly formidable when underestimated. As she left the hall, Lyra glanced back at Raxor. He was still muttering under his breath, frustrated and bewildered. He had learned something vital today. Strength alone was not enough to dominate the galaxy, and Lyra Kane, the human cadet who had never risen from her seat, had proven it. For Lyra, it was just another step in a long journey. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and opportunities. Humans had a place in it, not through raw power, but through ingenuity, patience, and the quiet brilliance of minds willing to think differently. And Lyra Kane intended to show the galaxy just how formidable humans could be. The morning light spilled through the transparent dome of Star Academy, painting the training hall in shades of gold and silver. Cadets from all over the galaxy moved with energy, adjusting equipment and checking their personal consoles. Despite the bustling activity, Lyra Kane remained calm, seated at her station as always. Her eyes scanned the room, her mind already calculating patterns, observing behaviors, and noting the subtleties of the day's exercises. Raxor was present too, pacing near the central platform with visible frustration. His crimson skin seemed brighter in the morning light, muscles tense as he flexed repeatedly. The events of the previous day had shaken his confidence, and his pride had been bruised by a human who had outsmarted him without ever standing. He had spent hours reviewing simulations in his quarters, convinced he could find a way to regain his dominance. Lyra did not look at him. She had learned long ago that arrogance often carried its own weaknesses. By ignoring it, she allowed herself the clarity to plan, to anticipate, and to act with precision. Today's exercises were going to be tougher, she knew, but she also knew humans thrived under challenges that required intelligence, patience, and quick thinking. Instructor Talvin stepped forward, calling the cadets to attention. Today's challenge will combine tactical strategy, teamwork, and rapid adaptability, he announced. Each team will face shifting obstacles, unpredictable scenarios, and opponents of comparable skill. Success will not come from raw strength alone. He paused, glancing at Lyra.
Cadet Kane, your abilities have drawn attention. Let us see how well you apply them in increasingly dynamic situations.
Lyra's team gathered around her station, eager but trusting. They had begun to learn the quiet rhythm of her mind, the way she could manipulate the simulations to guide them without drawing attention to her control. Other cadets whispered among themselves, observing the growing influence of humans in the academy. Even instructors had started to recognize that cleverness, strategy, and patience could surpass strength. The exercise began. Holographic walls shifted rapidly, platforms rotated unexpectedly, and obstacles emerged that required careful timing and teamwork to overcome. Raxor's team charged immediately, relying on the same brute force that had failed them before. They moved quickly, knocking aside obstacles and attempting to dominate the scenario through sheer strength. Lyra's team, in contrast, moved efficiently under her guidance. She observed the environment, anticipating the movement of obstacles and the tendencies of Raxor's team. Subtle adjustments on her console guided her team around hazards and optimized their path to each checkpoint. While her cadets appeared to be moving freely, every step was influenced by careful planning and precise manipulation of the simulation. Raxor noticed again.
How is she doing this? He muttered, frustration rising. She's not moving, and yet she controls everything. Lyra, as always, did not respond. Her eyes followed the patterns of movement, calculating, adjusting, and predicting. Humans had always excelled in observation, noticing details that others overlooked, and today she would demonstrate that patience and strategy could not only match strength but exceed it. As the exercise progressed, the simulation introduced a new layer of complexity, moving platforms with variable speeds, some accelerating suddenly, others slowing unexpectedly. Cadets who relied solely on instinct began to stumble. Raxor, confident in his reflexes, attempted to leap across a series of platforms, only to misjudge the timing. He landed awkwardly, just missing a support beam, and nearly fell. Lyra anticipated this movement and adjusted the simulation subtly, redirecting his momentum harmlessly, but causing a minor delay. Her team moved smoothly, guided by invisible adjustments that they did not consciously notice. They were calm, precise, and efficient, qualities that contrasted sharply with the chaos of Raxor's team. Cadets watching from the sidelines began to whisper, marveling at how a human could orchestrate such control without leaving her seat. The next stage introduced another challenge, precision tasks requiring coordinated teamwork. Cadets had to interact with holographic panels, activating sequences in perfect timing to advance. Raxor tried to take charge, barking orders at his team, but his impatience and reliance on physical dominance caused confusion. His team struggled to synchronize, while Lyra's team followed her subtle guidance flawlessly. Lyra's fingers moved quickly over her console, adjusting sequences, anticipating delays,
and guiding her team to success. When a holographic barrier suddenly emerged to block their path, she calculated the exact moment to shift it, allowing her team to pass while Raxor's team collided with the obstacle. His frustration grew with each mistake, while Lyra's calm confidence remained unshaken. The final part of the exercise introduced a direct interaction between the teams. Each group had to retrieve a glowing orb from a central platform and return it to their starting point. Obstacles and moving platforms surrounded the area, and timing was critical. Raxor rushed forward, relying on speed and strength. Lyra did not move. She observed every detail, the angle of the platforms, the speed of the moving walls, and Raxor's predictable pattern of attacks. Using her console, Lyra activated a subtle energy field around the platform. It did not harm anyone but redirected Raxor's movements, causing him to stumble just as he attempted to grab the orb. His momentum was misaligned, and his team struggled to keep up. Lyra's cadets moved efficiently, following the path she had calculated to minimize obstacles and maximize speed. Raxor's frustration reached a peak.
"This human!" he shouted. "She's cheating!"
Lyra looked up briefly, her expression calm. "I am not cheating," she said. "I am using observation, strategy, and timing." "You assumed strength alone would win. You were wrong."
Instructor Talvin intervened, raising a hand. "Cadet Raxor," he said firmly. "Rules have not been broken. This is strategy in action."
Strength is not the only measure of skill. Cadet Kane demonstrates that thinking, observation, and adaptability are equally important. Raxor seethed but could not argue. He had underestimated Lyra once more, and her methods had neutralized his team's advantages. The cadets watching understood something vital. Humans could achieve victory through intelligence and ingenuity, qualities often overlooked in a galaxy obsessed with physical prowess. Lyra's team completed the challenge flawlessly, retrieving the orb and returning it to their starting point with precise timing. Their success was met with quiet applause from instructors and cadets alike. Raxor's team arrived moments later, disheveled and frustrated, having struggled with obstacles that Lyra had already mastered. The hall was buzzing with discussion. "How does she do it?" whispered one alien cadet. "She doesn't even move, and yet she controls everything." Lyra's team gathered around her station, eyes wide with admiration. "It's incredible," one cadet said. "She's always calm, always precise. How do you do it?" Lyra smiled faintly. "I watch. I think.
"I plan. That is how humans succeed," she said.
"We may not always be the strongest or the fastest, but we notice what others miss and use it to our advantage." Her words resonated. Many cadets had believed that strength and speed were all that mattered. Lyra had shown that intelligence, observation, and patience could outperform brute force every time. Raxor, still red-faced, moved to a corner and muttered under his breath. He had underestimated humans for too long, and now he understood that their value went far beyond physical ability. Strength could be neutralized, speed could be predicted, but cleverness and adaptability were much harder to counter. Instructor Talvin approached Lyra, nodding in approval. "You are setting a new standard," he said.
"Other cadets are beginning to recognize that the human mind is a powerful tool. Do not let anyone make you think otherwise."
Lyra nodded politely. "Thank you, instructor. I will continue to do my best." The rest of the day was filled with smaller exercises, each designed to test different aspects of strategy, observation, and teamwork. Lyra excelled in every scenario, often guiding her team to success without them even realizing how much her subtle manipulations had helped. Other cadets began to watch more closely, learning from her methods. Raxor attempted to regain his confidence by pushing himself harder, charging forward in every exercise, but his over-reliance on strength continued to cause mistakes. Lyra's calm, precise approach made his efforts appear reckless, and the contrast was clear to everyone observing. By the end of the day, it was evident that the perception of humans in Star Academy had shifted. Cadets who had laughed at Lyra days ago now whispered respectfully, some even taking notes on her approach. Strength, they realized, was not the only measure of success. Observation, patience, and strategic thinking were equally vital, and Lyra had demonstrated this repeatedly. As the cadets left the hall, Lyra remained seated for a moment, reflecting on the day's exercises. She had shown that humans could not only compete with, but surpass the galaxy's elite in certain areas. The lesson was clear. Underestimate humans at your own risk. Raxor, still muttering to himself, glanced at her one last time before leaving. There was a grudging respect in his eyes, though he would never admit it aloud. Lyra had proven that intelligence, precision, and adaptability were weapons in their own right, sometimes more powerful than any physical strength. Lyra leaned back, fingers resting lightly on her console, already thinking ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she was ready. Humans were underestimated, yes, but that was their advantage. By observing, calculating, and adapting, they could turn even the most daunting obstacles into opportunities. The Academy was a place where strength often ruled, but Lyra had shown that brains could triumph over brawn, patience over impulsiveness, and strategy over raw force. And in the vast galaxy beyond the dome, these lessons would carry far greater weight. Lyra Kane had not only survived another day, she had reshaped the perception of her species. Humans were clever, adaptable, and remarkably formidable when underestimated. And as she left the hall, she knew that the greatest challenges and the truest opportunities to prove herself and her kind were still ahead. The galaxy had not yet seen the full measure of human ingenuity, but Lyra Kane intended to show it, one careful, calculated move at a time. The next morning, the Star Academy training hall was unusually quiet. Cadets moved with focused energy, preparing for the final challenge of the cycle. Today's exercises were the most difficult yet, dynamic scenarios combining strategy, teamwork, and improvisation, with simulated opponents designed to push every cadet to their limits. Lyra Kane arrived early, sliding into her seat with her usual calm. Her console glowed softly, and her fingers hovered over the controls, ready to guide the simulations with precision. She had learned a lot over the past few days, how each alien species reacted under pressure, which cadets relied too heavily on strength, and which could adapt to subtle changes. Her mind had become a map of the Academy, the obstacles, and the patterns of her opponents. Raxor entered the hall moments later, flanked by his elite team. His crimson skin seemed brighter than ever, muscles tensed, eyes fixed on Lyra. He had spent every night since their last encounter studying her tactics, convinced he could finally defeat her. He had confidence in his strength and reflexes, but the memory of being outmaneuvered without her even standing haunted him. As the instructors called the cadets to attention, Raxor stepped forward, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Today I will prove once and for all that humans are no match for true strength. Prepare yourself, Cadet Kane." Lyra did not flinch. She adjusted her console slightly, preparing the simulation for the most complex scenario yet. "We'll see," she said calmly. The exercise began. Holographic walls rose and fell, moving platforms shifted in unpredictable patterns, and simulated adversaries appeared across the floor. Cadets rushed forward, eager to demonstrate their skills. Raxor led his team aggressively, charging through obstacles with the same confidence he had relied on for years. Lyra remained seated. She observed every movement, noting timing, angles, and tendencies. Her fingers manipulated the simulation subtly, guiding her team through the maze with invisible precision. Every wall, platform, and obstacle moved exactly when and how she needed, allowing her team to progress without struggle. Raxor noticed immediately. "She's doing it again!" he shouted. "She's controlling the simulation!" Instructor Talvin raised a hand. "Cadet Raxor, all actions are within the rules. Observation and strategy are part of this challenge." Lyra's team moved calmly through the obstacles, completing tasks with perfect coordination. Raxar's team, relying on strength and speed, struggled with the shifting environment. Every misstep slowed them down, every miscalculated jump or push costing precious seconds. Then, the central challenge appeared, a platform suspended above a holographic energy field with a control panel that had to be activated to win. Both teams moved toward it. Raxor charged, his confidence visible in every step. Lyra observed carefully, analyzing the timing and the angles. She could see the predictable pattern in Raxor's approach. His speed and strength made his movements consistent, almost mechanical. She activated her console with precision. A subtle energy field emerged around the platform, calibrated perfectly to interact with Raxor's movements. It did not harm him, but it redirected his momentum just enough to slow him and unbalance his arm. Raxor yelped in surprise as his arm was momentarily trapped by the simulation's kinetic field. His momentum faltered, and he stumbled slightly. Lyra did not move from her seat. She only adjusted the controls again, guiding the force so that it applied precisely against his expected motion. Her team moved forward efficiently, completing the sequence to activate the panel without hesitation. The soft chime of success echoed through the hall, signaling their victory. Raxor's team arrived moments later, frustrated and off balance, unable to recover from the precise manipulations Lyra had implemented. The hall was silent for a heartbeat, then filled with applause and whispers. Cadets marveled at the human who had effectively neutralized the elite alien without leaving her seat. Strength, they realized, was not everything. Intelligence, observation, and strategy could overcome even the most powerful opponents. Raxor stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the loss settling in. His face was a mixture of anger and grudging respect. He looked at Lyra, who remained calm and composed, her fingers resting lightly on the console. "This
Human," he muttered. "I've never encountered anyone like her." Lyra looked back calmly.
"There is much more to learn," she said softly. "Strength alone is not enough. Observation, timing, and adaptability matter just as much." Instructor Talvin stepped forward, clapping slowly.
"Cadet Kane, you have demonstrated the true power of the human mind."
Others may rely on brute force, but your strategic thinking, patience, and precision have proven equally formidable. Today you have shown why humans are valued in intergalactic operations. The other cadets gathered around, their eyes wide with admiration.
"That was incredible," one said.
You didn't even move, and yet you outsmarted him completely.
Lyra smiled faintly.
I didn't need to.
I used the tools and knowledge available to me. Observation and careful calculation can be more effective than rushing forward blindly. Raxor, still catching his breath, finally stepped forward. His pride was wounded, but he had learned an important lesson.
"Cadet Kane," he said gruffly, "you are formidable."
I underestimated humans. I will not forget this. Lyra nodded, her expression neutral but respectful. Learning is part of the journey, she said. We all have strengths. You will find yours as well. The instructors allowed a brief break before the final ranking and evaluation. Lyra's performance had not only secured her team's top position but also changed perceptions throughout the academy. Cadets who had once doubted humans now approached her for advice, eager to learn from her methods. During the break, her team gathered around, excited and inspired. "How do you think of all this so fast?" asked one young cadet. Clearly in awe, Lyra smiled.
I watch.
I calculate. I adjust.
Humans succeed when they notice what others overlook. That is our advantage. Her words resonated deeply. Many cadets had assumed that physical prowess defined superiority in the academy. Lyra had shown them that intellect, patience, and observation could be just as powerful, sometimes more so. The final exercise of the day was announced, an inter-team tactical challenge that combined strategy, agility, and collaboration. The objective was to navigate a shifting battlefield and capture a series of holographic flags before other teams could. The scenario was designed to reward adaptability, timing, and careful planning. Lyra's team approached the challenge calmly. She analyzed the layout, the positions of the other teams, and the likely strategies they would employ. Using her console, she adjusted the environment subtly, creating openings for her team and gently redirecting the paths of opposing cadets without causing harm. Raxor's team charged forward immediately, relying on speed and aggression. As expected, the shifting platforms and walls disrupted their progress. Lyra anticipated these movements and guided her team flawlessly, capturing each flag with perfect timing. The other cadets watched in astonishment, unable to comprehend how a human could control the battlefield from a seated position. By the end of the exercise, Lyra's team had captured all the flags and completed the scenario faster than any other group. The simulation recognized their victory, and a soft chime echoed through the hall. Cadets erupted in applause, cheering for the human who had consistently outsmarted the elite aliens. Raxor, exhausted and humbled, finally approached Lyra again.
"I misjudged you," he admitted quietly. "Humans..."
"You are clever, precise, and patient. I see now that strength alone cannot overcome that."
Lyra nodded.
"We each have our strengths. You rely on yours, and I rely on mine. The galaxy is vast and every skill has its place." The instructors stepped forward to conclude the day. "Today you have all learned a valuable lesson," Instructor Talvin said. "Physical strength is important, but intelligence, observation, and adaptability are equally powerful. Cadet Kane has exemplified these qualities in a remarkable way. She represents the ingenuity and potential of humanity in intergalactic service." As the hall cleared, cadets approached Lyra, seeking advice and guidance. Even some of Raxor's team members nodded respectfully, acknowledging her skill. Humans, often underestimated, had proven themselves capable of surpassing even the strongest alien elites when their strengths were fully applied. Lyra leaned back in her seat for a moment, letting the quiet settle over her. She had accomplished much more than winning exercises. She had shifted perceptions, inspired allies, and demonstrated that humans were a force to be reckoned with, not through raw strength, but through strategy, intelligence, and calm determination. The sun set beyond the Academy's dome, casting long shadows across the training hall. Lyra reflected on the journey so far. Every exercise, every challenge, every encounter with the elite had reinforced a single truth. Humans thrived when underestimated. Their ingenuity, patience, and ability to adapt made them formidable in ways few could predict. Raxor watched from a distance, silently acknowledging the lesson he had learned. Lyra Kane had shown him that humans were clever, resilient, and capable of remarkable feats. Strength was not the only measure of greatness. The mind, guided by patience and observation, could surpass even the most powerful opponents. Lyra packed her console carefully, preparing for the next day's challenges. The Academy had become a proving ground, not just for physical skill, but for intellect, strategy, and innovation. Humans had arrived, and they were ready to show the galaxy what they could do. As she left the hall, she glanced up at the stars visible through the dome. There was a vast universe beyond the Academy, full of opportunities and challenges. And Lyra Kane, a human cadet who had never let others' doubts define her, was ready to face them all. The galaxy had not yet seen the full measure of human potential, but it would. Lyra had proven that humans could succeed not through brute force, but through cleverness, precision, and the quiet power of an observant mind. And this was only the beginning. Lyra Kane, seated, calm, and always thinking several steps ahead, walked confidently toward the future. The universe was wide, full of challenges, and ready for humans to leave their mark. Today she had shown that humans could triumph where others relied solely on strength. Tomorrow and every day after, they would continue to prove it, one clever, calculated move at a time.